The madness of the draft and free agency finally seems to be settling down, and with the dust starting to cover everything, I wanted to talk about someone that has kind of been moved to the back burner with all of this craziness. Specifically, Martin Kout and the season he had. From the get-go, this season was always going to be a big question mark for Kout. Drafted 16th overall, he was immediately coming off of a surgery to resolve a heart condition. The Avs' willingness to draft him there pretty much solidified the idea that the condition itself was completely solved and would not be a problem. With that said, because of issues stemming from that and the surgery, Kout basically couldn't work out for the entire offseason. There was no doubt that this was going to put him behind, and that clearly did show all season long, particularly in the stamina category. With that said, Kout still had a very strong year for one of the youngest players in the AHL this season. The first thing you'll notice about Kout's game in the AHL is how patient and responsible he is. He's never afraid to circle back or hang on to the puck an extra second or two to make sure he doesn't make a mistake. His multiple years of pro experience in the top Czech league combined with his 6'2" frame means he had no trouble at all dealing with the physicality of the league, and while he usually wasn't too physical himself, if it was required, he could absolutely do it. You would also expect this to get turned up a bit as he continues to fill out. We'll get onto that subject a little bit more in a bit. So at first, Kout relied on his defensive abilities to find comfort in the AHL and North America, but as you saw him start to adjust to things more and more, you saw more offense start to come for him. His shot is sneakily very good, one of the best on the Eagles in my opinion, and he also plays incredibly well off of teammates. When you give skill to him, he can play off of that and make that player better. As the season went on for Kout, he began to realize that in the minors, sometimes you have to be able to produce by yourself, not relying on your teammates, and while it did take a while for him to figure that out, particularly in the second half of the year, he really started to be able to do that. At the midway point of the year, Martin Kout, being 19, did go to the World Juniors tournament for the Czech Republic. This is where I believe he showed that he really is ready to play with other talented players close to the NHL level. On a line for much of the tournament with Martin Necas, he scored 3 goals and 1 assist for 4 points in 5 games. Most of those points came from good chemistry with Necas, and a couple of the goals came from working hard down low in the dirty areas, getting his stick out there, someone gets the puck to him, and he finishes the job. While the Czech Republic was bounced early from the World Junior Tournament, it seemed to give Kout quite a bit of confidence, and he returned to the AHL with that. More than half of his goals came in the second half of the season after returning from that tournament, and it was clear that he was ready to start taking some of the next steps. And in some ways, he did. He was solid in almost every single game. There was rarely a time that he was weak. I would say in 90% of games he was a positive impact player for the team, and he was occasionally the best player on the ice for the team. I think he had the potential to be the best player for them more, but that offseason where he couldn't do anything and his lack of legs often cost him. He couldn't play as much time on ice, and he didn't get as much opportunity because of that, leading to players like AJ Greer and Andrew Agozzino leading the way. There were times when Kout's offensive impact wasn't where you would like it to be because of that, and because he just wasn't able to generate enough. He wasn't quite comfortable enough to push it that extra little bit offensively. So there is certainly significant room for growth there. However, on the other hand, he often scored some big-time goals for the Eagles, including 3 points in the last 4 games of the season to help them squeak into the playoffs. The playoffs themselves were interesting for Kout. He did score 2 goals, but both of them came in the final game of the year for the team, and while 2 goals in 4 games doesn't seem like a ton, you have to remember that not only for the playoffs, but for a large portion of the season, the entire Eagles team really struggled to score points. So Kout putting up the numbers he did, I think it's actually better than it looks. While I do think there is plenty more Kout could take from playing in the AHL this season, I do think he could be just fine in the NHL as well. On the season, Kout had 12 goals and 14 assists for 26 points in 63 AHL games, and he also added 4 points in 5 WJC games and 2 goals in 4 AHL playoff games. Based on his season as a whole, I'm going to give him a solid B grade. His offseason problems were always going to hold him back this year, but despite that, he still played quite well in the Avs system and took good steps. There's still more you expect out of him. You would expect him to be much more dominant in the AHL if that's where he does play for at least some of this season. And at this point, he is still an unknown at the NHL level. However, I hope that that changes in this coming year. The Avs did sign a number of players, and that's going to make it hard for him to get in the lineup, at least on things like opening night and in the early parts of the season. But when injuries inevitably happen, you have to think Kout needs to be right near the top of the list of call-ups. On top of that, he just finished up a fantastic development camp where he looked head and shoulders above his peers there. He looks bigger, he looks stronger, he looks like a man ready to step into the NHL. While it is likely that we'll have to wait a bit for Kout to be an NHL regular, I don't think we'll have to wait that long. Hopefully by the end of this coming season, he's in there. That is the end of this player's season video review. Thank you for watching, and as always, a special thank you to all of my contributors on both PayPal and Patreon. All of you are amazing, and I appreciate your generosity so very much. If you like content like this, consider donating a couple of bucks down at the links in the description. I'm Rudo3, and I guess the real off-season kind of begins now.
Avalanche time, come on, grab your friends. We're going to the playoffs again with Nate the dog and Gabe the big. The fun isn't over yet, it is Avalanche time.